Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to a frigid Thursday in the middle of December. I don't know if anybody else is feeling the cold, but right now it's about 1 degree in Verona, and yeah, it looks beautiful out there, but hopefully it will warm up a little bit and everybody can enjoy their day. Welcome to Naviant's Solution Spotlight for December. Today's topic is on Intelligent Capture for Accounts Payable. So without any further ado, we will get started here. My name is Guy Schrader. I am the Manager of Sales Engineering here with Naviant, and I will be your sole presenter this morning. A few housekeeping items. Just a reminder, since you're on a GoToWebinar, your voice is muted on this webinar, so I cannot hear you if you actually try to talk to me. So please use the chat box or the questions section within the GoToWebinar panel that appears on your screen. And also just a reminder, please remember to complete the survey that's at the end of this webinar. We prompt you for additional topics that you might want to look at in the future. We do take those seriously to help us to develop content in the future. With that, a high-level overview of what our agenda looks like today. We're going to go through why you might want to consider utilizing Intelligent Capture for Accounts Payable, otherwise known as ICAP. We'll then go through what is it, what it's not. That's important to know and understand also. We'll go through an overview of what a process might look like utilizing ICAP, and then take a deeper dive into what the product looks like, a little bit into the configuration and how the technology works. Some of the benefits, also talking about is this technology right for you, as well as pricing, and leaving a few minutes just for questions and answers at the end. So we have a lot to cover here, so let's get moving here. So why would you consider utilizing Intelligent Capture for Accounts Payable? Well, for starters, it is designed specifically for helping to capture and extract information off of accounts payable invoices. If you're working in a whole different area of your organization and are looking for a technology to help extract information off of different document types besides invoices, you're probably attending the wrong webinar and looking at the wrong product. It is really designed specifically for invoices. If you're doing a lot of manual keying of data off of those invoices into your ERP system, this might be a good product for you. Obviously, that's very labor intensive to go ahead and key all that information, and even if it's a lengthy process to go through that whole approval process to get to the payment of the invoices, you might be missing discounts, you might be paying some late fees. This Intelligent Capture for Accounts Payable can speed that extraction up front and really help to streamline that process. If you're redundantly indexing documents inside of your ECM system after you've already keyed that information into your ERP system, all that redundant keying can go away along with this. Again, speeding the process, saving costs for your organization. And since we see it a lot, I thought it was beneficial to mention a lot of organizations are acquiring others, shared services are now taking over. You're being told that you're going to be seeing an increase in the invoice volume in the future. Obviously, you're going to have to process more work without increasing your staff. That has a major impact on your world. This is a great time to start talking about a technology like this that allows you to process that many more invoices without adding people. So Intelligent Capture for Accounts Payable, what is it? It is a component of an accounts payable automation solution, and I highlight that component word because in and of itself, it is not an end-to-end AP automation solution. Really what it is an OnBase module that is specifically designed to recognize your different types of accounts payable documents and extract the necessary information off of those documents in order to utilize that information for downstream processing within workflow and ultimately posting transactions into your ERP system. It is fully integrated with the rest of the OnBase package, and I highlight that because there are many other tools out there that do something similar to what ICAP does. They are a third-party product. They require redundant hardware and software and configuration integrating with your ERP system. OnBase, everything is fully integrated. When you build it, everything is pretty much ready to go for ICAP as well as the other capabilities. When you're using ICAP, you're going to use the Unity client to do your familiar capture and indexing of documents. Your capture is really no different than what you might be doing today inside the OnBase world. Scanning via production document imaging license or importing via other products. It does utilize OCR and optical character recognition, but it does not use templates. There are a boatload of template-based solutions that can recognize invoices, but think when you have to deal with a template, every single vendor and their different format of invoices that they come up with, you'd have to design a different template. Not with Intelligent Capture for Accounts Payable. It's smart enough to recognize the different formats that might be out there. You're also going to be leveraging ERP vendor data that we do need to import into OnBase to determine and recognize which vendor that this invoice is coming from. Because think, vendors don't put your vendor ID that your ERP system knows on that, and oftentimes their logo is a logo, and you don't even really know who that is, short of having some knowledge. That imported information helps to recognize the appropriate vendor. What it's not, again, something really key. Again, it's not a complete AP solution by itself. It really is that extraction tool up front to capture that information off of the invoices, but then to utilize that information as part of OnBase Workflow, as well as any ERP integration that you need to build into this. So you usually utilize Workflow to do any routing of non-PO based invoices, that approval, that GL coding that needs to come back from the different departmental approvers. That's Workflow, not ICAP doing that. Workflow also would be doing line item pairing. So think when you have a PO based invoice, while we can extract via ICAP all of the line items, we are not doing the pairing at this point in time natively within ICAP. That needs to happen within the workflow process, as well as any exception handling is all done through Workflow. That may be something coming in the future with ICAP, but at this point in time, line item pairing is not part of it. ERP posting, again, that needs to happen outside of ICAP. Again, focusing specifically that this is the capture tool. So real high-level overview, we need to capture our documents, whether those are images or PDFs that might be brought in some form or fashion. ICAP is then going to run its process to extract the different pieces of information off of those documents. They're going to be stored as OnBase keywords. And then if there's any questionable items or we haven't learned anything from that particular vendor previously, somebody's going to have to verify that information, confirming that the tool did things properly. But it picks up speed over time because it learns from these different vendors as we go along. So, a process overview, just to kind of highlight how this looks like from a user perspective. You still need to capture those documents in some form or fashion, whether you're scanning via that OnBase scanning interface or via some other means, such as your Outlook integration or other mail integrations that are out there, or utilizing the OnBase mailbox importer, invoices at yourorganization.com. Everything could automatically be introduced to the system. Also sweeping or utilizing any type of fax integrations if you're still receiving a number of invoices via fax. That doesn't change from how you currently might be capturing your invoices just to scan inside the OnBase world. The scan queues themselves that are going to be capturing your invoices do need to be configured for Intelligent Capture for Accounts Payable. That's really just a setting, and then when that batch is created, that batch is pushed off to an OnBase data capture server, so it's going to be running on server class hardware to perform the classification of your different types of invoices. You may classify as PO versus non-PO. There's also some supporting documents that might be there, but then performing that true OCR extraction of the information off of those documents. That data capture server does need to have some high power behind it because that OCR does take a lot of CPU cycles. For those invoices that are questionable, that batch then comes back natively to that index in progress queue. That's where any users that are going to be involved within the process are going to look at those invoices, correct any questionable or missing values that might be might not appear, might not have been captured appropriately. But then the system can learn from that information also on a vendor-by-vendor basis. So as I mentioned there, it learns how to properly extract from each of our different vendors, where in the future, after we train it a little bit, it does a better job at recognizing specific components off of each of the different vendor invoices that come in. So we're going to walk through this relatively quickly, just some screenshots to show you what that flow might look like. All things said and done, this is the Unity client here. You're going to be utilizing that batch scanning that you see in the upper portion of the screen there. Click on that. If you're using scanning within Unity today, this is going to look very familiar. You're going to go ahead and configure and select a specific scan queue that is configured for Intelligent Capture for Accounts Payable and scan via the scan button that we see here. That's going to go ahead and pull those invoices through the scanner that you have connected. All things said and done, you can do some image review if need be. But then once we back out of this, that batch automatically goes off to that data capture server, and it's going to go ahead and first off wait potentially for Intelligent Capture to kick in, as we're seeing here, and awaiting Intelligent Capture for Accounts Payable. Once it picks up the batch, you'll see that it's currently sitting in Intelligent Capture in progress. How long this takes is going to be dependent upon how large that batch of invoices is. OCR, it's relatively speedy, but it's not going to be chugging through thousands of invoices within seconds. It's really hard to say. There's a lot of factors that come into it, but I always like to use the rule of thumb that it's probably about 5 seconds per invoice for the system to go ahead and plug through that. Once that batch is completed, it should come directly into this index in progress, where you can see that ICAP batch is now ready for me to index, and we index it just similar to any other batch that we've captured. We right click and we say index, and that takes us to our indexing panel. Similar to what we normally see here, we have all of our keywords appearing on the left side of the screen. We also see the invoice image. A few things change, given we do still see the different documents that we have here, but it's going to jump only to those documents that it needs attention. It will bypass those others. So for example, it jumps to this first invoice that doesn't have the check mark by it, saying in this particular case, we have not encountered an invoice for Kodak previously. We need to verify this information and make sure that everything was extracted appropriately, make any necessary corrections. It will then learn from that information and processing it in the future. So as we start working through some of our different components here, by the way, it did recognize that there was no PO number on this particular, that there was a PO number on this invoice, and hence it classified it as a PO-based invoice. Obviously, for non-PO-based invoices, we don't have to capture the line items, and conversely for PO invoices. As we move through our different fields here, for example, our PO number I've selected in the left panel, but notice that over here on the right, it actually highlights where it found that information so that you have visual verification, what was found. Same thing with the invoice number. Same thing with the invoice total, where it found this information. Dates, it can go ahead and recognize different date formats. This is relatively simple, but we'll go ahead and normalize that for however dates are being stored inside of your OnBase system. And then we can get down to the line item details. Since this was a PO-based invoice, we've instructed the system to extract all of the line item details and effectively determine what each of these different columns of data is and put them into the appropriate fields. Now notice down in the bottom here, when we get down in this line item detail, this is somewhat redundant to what we see on the left-hand side that appears in green. It might just be easier for the user to look at this bottom portion where, in the same order that it found the information off of the document, quantity 1, unit of box, product code of 9901-125, description, price per unit, so on and so forth, to validate that information. So the user has the option to select either the fields on the left or the fields on the bottom to, again, just verify that information, make sure everything has been extracted appropriately. In this case, everything was. Again, we haven't experienced anything for Kodak in the past. Notice this ICAP extraction summary that appears down at the bottom. You can expand that at any point in time by double-clicking on it. That brings up the panel on the right-hand side where you can see how it found our vendor. It matched that vendor based upon the phone number of 530-530-5000. It extracted all the rest of that information. And down at the bottom of that window, the line item validation exceptions, it says that the line item extraction results were not confirmed with learned data. Hence, I did not previously experience anything for Kodak. That's why this was being prompted to me. All things said and done, after I review all that information, I can come over and just index that document as normal, and that's going to take me to the next document that requires my attention. Notice in the lower left-hand corner, we jumped all the way down, probably skipped about 4 invoices there because those were extracted with learned data previously. I don't have to touch them. The system was confident enough that it found everything. So that takes us directly to vending solutions. This one was categorized as a non-PO based invoice. You can see the PO number field over here in the middle of the screen. There's nothing there. That's how it classified it as a non-PO. And again, I can see that it highlighted some different information. The invoice total was questionable. The invoice date was questionable. It will allow us to stop on those different fields so that when I switch to this invoice total, I can see it did pick up the wrong information. It's going to happen. We need to train the system a little bit here. And how we do that, we just take our cursor and draw a line directly over that total charges area. That's what we need to consider as our total. And when I click on that again, it will go ahead and populate that information directly into that invoice total field so that now we can see that on the left. I don't have to retype that, but by me now drawing that line over it, the system knows, well, instead of that labor amount of 120, when I encounter something for vending solutions in the future, I need to look at that total charges amount that appears and grab that. That's how we're teaching the system. When we take a look at a different invoice date, different format, it wasn't 100% sure it did extract it properly, hence the reason why it was in yellow. So we can just validate that information, move on, hit the index to move to my next document. Now this one came up, and as I quickly look at it, it's a non-PO invoice, but it did not recognize who the vendor was. That can happen, obviously, if you are for the first time receiving an invoice for a vendor. You can begin typing in that vendor name field, and it'll show us where it found that information on the invoice also. But all things said and done, you have to click that down arrow, and it tells me that it didn't find any items. That's because we do not have Anderson Office Supply within our vendor master. That's a problem. This needs to be handled as an exception that would be passed off to workflow without any vendor ID or vendor name, so that somebody could go ahead and set that up appropriately within the ERP system, and then we'd be able to process this invoice further. Moving on to the last invoice really quick. Nothing was really wrong with this. I just wanted to show you that the system is able to recognize all the appropriate information again. But then this is a multiple lines that appear within the line item details. Again, it properly found that information and put it into that line item extraction verification area. After you finish up all the invoices, it goes to a waiting commit, just like normal inside the OnBase world. Somebody would have to commit this batch, but then if you have workflow behind the scenes here, those invoices would be routed off to workflow and begin that whole process. So I hope that was beneficial, just seeing a quick screenshot overview of what that process looks like. Now let's take a little bit of a deeper dive here. We can configure this solution in a number of different ways. So it doesn't come completely prepackaged. It needs to be configured. First off, what do we want to do with our document types? You can set up the system to recognize PO-based invoices versus non-PO-based invoices. There's also categories for unknown. I can't call this an invoice. I don't know what it is. There might be support documents. There might be miscellaneous documents that come along with this that might be necessary to process invoices appropriately through the rest of the workflow process. So each document type that we note above needs to be mapped to an OnBase document type as well as the OnBase keywords to these different capture data types. I'll show you that in just a few moments here. So really the key here is that you can keep your OnBase document type naming convention. We just need to map these PO versus non-PO invoices appropriately. And the same thing with the keywords. These captured data types need to map back to your OnBase keywords. That vendor recognition, again, is a key piece to this. We're going to have to take a vendor extract from your ERP system and load that into OnBase. And that can be scheduled. That can happen on a periodic basis. Let the systems kind of just communicate with each other, where we need at minimum some mailing address information, some phone numbers, if there's a fax number associated with that vendor, any email addresses, URLs, any of that information that we might see on the invoice. If we can feed that into OnBase, it will look upon the invoice, and if it recognizes any direct matches to any of those pieces of information, it'll utilize that to determine who that vendor is based upon your vendor master. So an updated vendor master is definitely important to go ahead and recognize these properly. As I mentioned before, there's all these different capture data types. This is what the system comes pre-configured to be able to recognize for the different data elements that might appear on the invoice. I'm not going to go through these in length, but you can see the wide variety of different data elements that can be captured and mapped to your OnBase document types for further processing, including all those line items that you see in the lower portion of the right-hand column there. So, moving forward just a little bit further, a little bit more of a deeper dive, we need to set up our scan queues to to utilize that intelligent capture for accounts payable processing. You can see the screenshot there. That's actually your scan queue configuration where we turn on that intelligent capture for AP processing. We need to go through the OnBase data capture configuration tool to configure ICAP. That would be something that is going to be installed along with intelligent capture for accounts payable, where we're setting up that ERP vendor data import, how those fields map up, that synchronization, how often that we're bringing that in, so on and so forth. But then we map out our different document types to those capture data types, again, those PO versus non-PO, support documents, so on and so forth. And then we map out the OnBase keywords associated with our map document types to those captured data types. A good example is you might call in your system invoice number INV pound. Well, that's going to map to that captured data type of an invoice number. So, getting close to wrapping up here. Some of the benefits. Obviously, you're going to reduce the cost of that data extraction. If you're doing manual data entry of every single element off of an invoice into your ERP system, potentially back into OnBase, this is going to go ahead and reduce that cost. It should improve the speed and accuracy. Like I mentioned, 5 seconds per invoice plus a little bit of validation time. That's going to be a lot faster than manually keying this information. And once the system learns these different vendors, the accuracy is going to be very, very high. The system should not continue to make errors, while humans can always make errors just by fat fingering. Everything's configured in a single application and maintained within OnBase in that single application. There's some beauty to that, that's obvious. And it's part of the entire AP solution. I can't harp on that enough. Not a standalone AP automation solution, a portion of that, just the capture and extraction front end. Utilize your OnBase workflow and whatever ERP posting integration that's been developed to actually get that data to your ERP system. So is it right for you? Tough question, because there are many variables here. For starters, if you're already using OnBase, it's worthy of consideration. If you are not a current OnBase customer, well, you have a little bit bigger of an investment here to actually get this thing off the ground. It may very well fit, but obviously talk with your Naviant account rep about that a little bit further. If you're processing a significant number of invoices, and I use those terms specifically because significant really is dependent upon your organization, the number of people that you have. Some organizations, significant might be 5 million. To another organization, significant might be a few hundred per week. If you're effectively processing more invoices than you can typically handle, or really all that you're doing is just processing the invoices and not doing a lot of value-added work, that may very well bode well for your organization to look at this. Again, if you're doing a lot of data entry in your ERP system, it's worth looking at. If you currently utilize or have a need to utilize OnBase Workflow, this fits in perfectly. We capture that information up front. We remove that data entry that probably takes place downstream within Workflow. Frankly, if you have a heavy volume of non-PO based invoices, this works really well. If you're probably heavier on PO based invoices, we still have to worry about that three-way match. That needs to be configured inside of OnBase Workflow. But for those non-PO based invoices where we're really just extracting the header and the footer information that's stored as OnBase keywords, we've recognized who the vendor is. And through Workflow, all that we really need to gather from that point forward is the GL coding information. It works really, really well in a situation like that. Now again, talk with your Naviant account rep to flesh this out a little bit further. They do bring me in as well as some of the other consultants and architects as need be to discuss different options and determine if this is right for you. So high-level pricing. Just want to let you know what this takes to look like. What this looks like from a pricing perspective. It is volume-based licensing. So per invoice, there is a cost to process, and it really is on an annual basis. And just to give you some examples, the baseline for ICAP starts at 50,000 invoices annually, and the cost of that is $25,000. Relatively reasonable compared to many other systems that might be out there. Again, you have to have the rest of the OnBase system to make this work. For example, if you're looking at roughly 200,000 invoices on an annual basis, $52,000 and change. If you're at 500,000 invoices, 118,000. So it is advantageous the more invoices that you're processing. The Highland licensing actually comes down the more that you actually process through the system. There are some complementary licenses that we need to consider. As we mentioned before, we do all of that validation through the Unity client server, so that's a necessity here. You do need to have your different modules for capturing these invoices, whether that be a production document imaging license, Outlook integration, mailbox importer, sweep, so on and so forth. So please keep that in mind as you look at this. You do need to have your OnBase named or concurrent clients to perform that validation. That is not inside of Workflow, that is natively inside of document indexing, so it really just is a client license that you need. And obviously, if you're using Workflow on the back end of the process here, you need to have the appropriate number of Workflow clients. So with that, I leave it open for questions. Hopefully that was beneficial for everybody, so please use the question or the chat section of the GoToWebinar. I don't see anything coming through yet. But for those people that need to run off to other appointments, I will just stick on myself and answer any questions that you have. But I did want to take just a moment to wish everybody out there happy holidays from everybody at Naviant here. I hope that you have a bountiful holiday season. Like I say, I'll stick on here to answer any questions that might be there. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time and attention, and look forward to presenting to you probably in the month of February when we'll have our next Solution Spotlight. Thanks again so much. Take care.